There are days that seem to begin like many others, but in silence prepare an abyss. And I'm not just talking about the sea. That June morning the sky was clear, but in my chest there was a strange unease. I tried to ignore it. I convinced myself it was just tiredness, or perhaps the invisible weight of the last few weeks. I wasn't working much, sleeping poorly. I spent nights scrolling through YouTube videos, often ending up on spiritual content, prophecies, testimonies of people who claimed to have been to hell. They fascinated me, but I didn't truly believe them. I thought, they're just fanatic Americans. I have God in my heart, even if I don't go to church. There's no need to be extreme. Yet, that curiosity wouldn't leave me. That morning, 3 friends and I decided to go on an exploratory dive near a shipwreck off Palmaria. We had been planning it for months. We had checked the tanks, the regulators, everything in order. The dinghy left early, and in less than 20 minutes we were at the right spot. The sea was unusually calm, almost still, as if it was watching us. I descended first, as always. The water enveloped me like a freezing embrace. I could feel my heart beating inside my wetsuit, like a muffled drum. The deeper I went, the more everything became muffled, unreal. At 22 meters, we reached the broken carcass of the fishing boat that sank in the 80s. It was there, sleeping on the bottom, with its bow split open and the remains of nets hanging like cobwebs. My friends took some photos. I approached the cabin. And that's when it happened. A sudden dizziness made my head spin, as if the sea had tilted all at once. My breath became irregular. The regulator began to whistle. I tried to manage the anxiety, but I felt my heart accelerate too much. Darkness tightened its grip on me. Then I saw a light, but it wasn't above me. It was below, as if someone had lit a fire in the depths of the seabed. I felt myself being sucked in, as if an invisible hand had grabbed my chest and was pulling me down, past the wreck, past the sand, past everything known. I remember the last thought before losing consciousness. I'm dying, but why do I feel peace? Then the light disappeared, and I fell. But not into darkness. I fell into something I didn't even know existed, a place no human language can truly describe, and it was only the beginning. I never understood if it was a dream, a vision, or something more real than reality itself. But I know that when I woke up, I was no longer in the sea, or at least not in a sea this world knows. I was lying on ground that seemed made of broken glass and burning coal, as if walking were a condemnation in itself. The heat burned my feet, yet I no longer had my wetsuit. I no longer had my body, at least not the one I knew. But I felt pain, real pain, and a sick wind, hot and acrid, cut my face like a blade. I looked up. The sky, if you could call it that, was a deep, pulsating red, as if it were bleeding. There was no silence, only screams. Human, inhuman screams. Some agonizing, others desperate, still others too twisted to seem human. And then there was laughter. But it wasn't laughter of joy. It was malicious, deep, sharp laughter, coming from creatures that roamed everywhere, creatures I dare not name. Some had humanoid forms, others were deformed, a fusion of beast, man, and nightmare. They looked at me, but they didn't touch me, as if someone or something had told them to let me pass. And I walked. Or perhaps I was dragged. The landscape changed under my feet. There were lakes of fire where naked souls writhed without ever dying. There were stone walls from which chained bodies hung, with blood blisters bursting continuously without end. There were cages, small as coffins, in which human beings were bent into unnatural positions and cried out to the God they had rejected. Then I saw a solitary figure standing naked with black skin torn by incandescent cracks and flames coming out of his bones. He screamed in a deep, broken tone, as if his throat were made of stone. I approached with slow steps, feeling that something about him was familiar. It was Chadwick Boseman, the actor from Black Panther. His skin opened like dry bark, and tongues of fire came out of the wounds that did not consume him but tortured him. His eyes were full of tears, but there was no redemption in that gaze, only regret. Then a deep voice, which seemed to shake the entire landscape, spoke with authority. It was not a voice like the others. It was the voice. You had the chance to know the truth, but you loved the world more than my light. You ignored my servants. You preferred the glory of men to the call of heaven. Every word was a sentence. Every phrase was like a sword in the flesh. Chadwick screamed again, but his scream was as if sucked into a void. No one listened. No one answered. And I understood that there, in that place, prayers do not arrive. There is no hope. There is no tomorrow. I didn't know where I was going, nor why I was there. But something inside me began to change. A new awareness was being born. Hell is not just pain, it is truth. It is seeing everything you ignored when there was still time to choose. And my journey had just begun. There is no time in that place, only presence or absence. Absence of God, absence of peace, absence of hope. Every step I took seemed like a betrayal of myself, yet I couldn't stop. It was as if something or someone was leading me from one point to another, not to punish me, but to show me, to wake me up. I passed a huge crevice in the ground where souls were sucked into a current of lava, like leaves in a raging river. They screamed words in languages I didn't know, but the pain was universal. Then I came to a different area, quieter, but much more oppressive. A silence that screamed from within. Around me, cages suspended in the air by black chains, thick as trees, hanging from hooks embedded in obsidian walls. In each cage, a soul. In each soul, a story. But there was one that drew my gaze with an inexplicable force. It was a man, chained upright. The chains didn't just hold him, they burned him. They fused with his skin, which sizzled, smoked, melted, and then regenerated in an infinite cycle of torture. The man had a familiar face. Those eyes, that scarred but handsome face. It took me a moment to recognize him, Paul Walker, the actor from Fast and Furious. His eyes were open, but he didn't see. He looked into the void, as if reliving every mistake, every wasted opportunity, every ignored message. His lips trembled. He didn't speak, but he wept. And every tear that fell seemed to generate a new link of chain, wrapping around his body more and more. Then a demon emerged from behind the cage. It was a thin, elongated creature with hands like knives and a smile that tasted not of joy, but of eternal mockery. It approached him, whispering words that seemed like blades. You ran fast, but you ran away from him, and now you can no longer escape. Then it laughed, a dry, grating laugh, like metal against metal. Paul closed his eyes, but the demon laughed even louder. Your end is just the beginning. Your speed could not save you. Your fame could not redeem you. And that's when I heard the voice again, the same one I had heard moments before. Strong, penetrating, sovereign. I sent you servants, I showed you the way, but you preferred the clamor of the world to the whisper of my spirit. You surrounded yourself with applause, but you never sought the silence in which I speak. Paul writhed, not from physical pain, that seemed to be part of him now, but from the words. Those words were heavier than the chains. They were the verdict, the truth that burns the soul more than fire. Then something terrible happened. A sort of screen opened in front of his cage, a hologram of his accident. The car, the impact, the fire, the death. And it started all over again, every time. Paul screamed at seeing himself die, and then he would return, to die again and again, a relentless cycle, a punishment with no escape. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask God why he was showing me all this, but deep down, I knew the answer. It was for me. And for those like me, those who think that doing good is enough, that fame, beauty, impact in the world are enough to redeem. But here there were no Oscars, no magazine covers, no fans, only truth, only justice, and tears that bring no relief. I continued, trembling. Every fiber of my being wanted to wake up, but it wasn't over yet. I had to see more. I had already seen enough for a lifetime. Yet, I felt that what was coming next would be different. Not worse in terms of physical torment, if it's possible to make comparisons in a place where everything is suffering, but worse for the soul, more intimate, more subtle. As if God wanted to show me that not everyone ends up there for having committed obvious crimes, but also for what the world calls success, glory, influence. After the vision of Paul Walker, I walked through a corridor of dark rock, so narrow my shoulders brushed the walls. Every step echoed as if hell itself was holding its breath. Then, suddenly, a vast hall opened before me, like a broken throne in the middle of a fallen temple. The air was denser there, as if even the pain had become more refined, almost silent. And in the center, sitting on a chair of broken stone fused with human bones, I saw a woman. At first, I only saw her back. She wore something that had once been a regal gown, now burned, torn, stuck to her flesh in several places. As I drew closer, my heart began to pound, harder than I had ever felt, as if my spirit recognized that figure even before my eyes did. Then I saw her, and there was no longer any doubt. It was Lady Diana. She wasn't beautiful as in the memories from photographs, in archived videos, in the world's remembrance. She was devastated. Her hands trembled, her face was etched with torment. But what struck me most were the holes, large, deep, as if her body had been pierced by invisible spears. There were holes in her arms, her legs, her back, as if an animal had torn her apart and left her alive. Yet there was no blood, only emptiness. As if each hole was a silent scream, a spiritual wound that time could not heal. She didn't speak, she didn't scream, she didn't beg, but her gaze, that gaze, I will never forget it. It was as if her soul had long since surrendered, aware that nothing would ever free her. She stared at me. For a moment, I felt an inexplicable connection, as if she was telling me without words, I could have done things differently, but now it's too late. You still can. Then the voice returned. It didn't shout, it whispered, but the whisper was louder than thunder. Loved by the world, ignored by me, celebrated by men, far from heaven. She had time, but she didn't choose. She had light, but she covered it with gold. She had children, but she did not recognize me as father. I felt a weight on my chest, not because it was judging me, but because I was seeing the truth about someone the world had loved deeply, and who was now there, alone. And something inside me broke. Lady Diana was not there because she was a bad person. She was there because she had chosen everything, except God, because she had lived for approval, image, the world. And now she was a prisoner, not only of demons, but of her own regrets. I couldn't breathe anymore. I wanted to flee, but I knew it wasn't over. The truth continued to strip me bare, and God was about to show me the last part of that journey. After the vision of Lady Diana, a deep wound had opened inside me, not only because of what I had seen, but because of what I had felt. It was as if hell, besides showing me tormented souls, had begun to penetrate my thoughts, my silences, the omissions that had marked my life. It was no longer just their screams that tormented me, but my own, my choices, or rather, my indifference. I had lived as if time were infinite, as if God were a concept to keep in the background. And now, there, in the heart of an eternal place, I could no longer hide. The landscape around changed again. There were no more cages, no fire, no souls, only darkness. A perfect, total darkness, but one that didn't cause fear. It was as if it was preparing me. And then, without warning, a light tore through that darkness. Not just any light. It was alive. It was conscious. It didn't come from a source. It was the source. And when it spoke, it wasn't with words, but with presence. Every particle of me was permeated by his voice. Luca. Only my name. But I felt every excuse, every shield, every illusion collapse within me. It was as if I had been waiting for it my whole life, and at the same time, as if I had been avoiding it. You have seen. You have listened. Now you understand. And before me, like waves of light, flowed all the moments when I had chosen compromise, when I had preferred to remain silent rather than bear witness, when I had shrugged off sin, when I had judged instead of loved, when I had said, I believe in God, but I'm not a fanatic. Words I had used to avoid the radicality of true faith. He showed me a map of my life, every gesture, every thought, every lost opportunity. Not with anger, but with justice. Not with hatred, but with truth. There was no longer room for self-deception. He was light, and light gives no discounts. It doesn't take away, but reveals. The world you love promises you freedom, but it shackles you. I have spoken to you many times, in dreams, in silences, in sorrows. But you covered my words with the music of the world. Now I show you what many will see too late, but you are allowed to return, not because you deserve it, but because I am mercy, and because I still have a task for you. In that moment I knelt, or at least I did so with my soul. I no longer had a body, but I was completely prostrated. I wept without tears, I screamed without sound, a cry that came from my entire existence, as if until then I had never truly lived. Then, the voice continued, sweeter but still full of power. Many today walk towards that place I have shown you, and they do not know it. They are convinced they are saved, but they do not know me. They speak of me, but they do not seek me. They attend churches, but they do not open their hearts. You will warn them. You will tell what you have seen. Even if they laugh, even if they doubt, the blood of these souls will not be on your hands if you speak. I was then shown a clock, suspended in the air, but the hands were running backward. Time was running out, not just for me, but for the world, and a flame ignited within me. It was not like the fire of hell. It was sacred fire, burning, pure, as if God Himself had placed it in my chest. Then, suddenly, everything disappeared. The light, the voice, time, space. Only a beat. Mine. And then, the return. My heart began to beat violently, as if an invisible blow had made it jump within my chest, calling it back to life. One beat, then another, then an increasingly strong sequence, like drums announcing the return of something that had been lost in eternal silence. I opened my eyes suddenly, blinded by the raw sunlight, and for a moment I no longer knew who I was or where I was. I only heard confused voices, hands shaking me, water on my face, an engine running in the distance, and the echo of fear in the eyes of those around me. I was lying on the bottom of the dinghy, trembling from the cold. But the cold I felt wasn't just from the sea. It was something deeper, as if a part of me had remained down there, in the place I had seen, a piece of my soul branded by the truth God had shown me. The voices around me were agitated. One of my friends was crying, another squeezed my hand as if to hold me back from a second abyss, and I remained there, motionless, breathing with difficulty, as if every breath was an undeserved gift. At the hospital, they said it was a sudden illness, perhaps a hyperventilation crisis, perhaps a vascular collapse, but no scientific explanation could ever describe what I had seen, felt, and understood. Inside me, something had changed forever. I was no longer the same boy who had dived to explore a wreck. I was a man who had seen eternity up close and returned with a burning message etched in my spirit. In the following days, even as I tried to sleep, the voice of God came back to speak to me, not to torment me, but to remind me, gently and with authority, that what I had experienced was not just for me, but for all those who still walk unknowingly towards an invisible abyss, hidden beneath the distractions of modern life. Every detail of the visions was imprinted in my mind with terrifying clarity. The fire that doesn't burn but consumes the soul, the chains that don't break, the tears that don't dry, and those eyes, the eyes of Chadwick, Paul, and Diana, that asked with their gaze what they could no longer ask with their voice. And I who had been saved, I who had been pulled back from the precipice, how could I remain silent? How could I go back to my old life, pretend that everything was normal, settle for a lukewarm and superficial faith, while millions of people walk towards the same eternal destiny without anyone telling them the truth? So today I tell, not for sensationalism, not to gain attention, but because the love of God has shaken me and sent me back with a mandate, to warn, to cry out, to awaken. Hell is real, and it is not a religious exaggeration. It is not an abstract concept or an allegory to scare children. It is a concrete, eternal, just place. And many will end up there not because they were criminals or monsters, but because they lived without ever truly seeking God, because they preferred the applause of men to the voice of the Spirit, because they spoke of faith but never let Christ truly change their lives. But there is hope, and that hope has a name: Jesus. As long as you are alive, as long as you can still breathe, there is time to turn around, to kneel, to cry out, "Lord, have mercy on me." And that cry will be heard, that plea will be answered, because God takes no pleasure in the death of the wicked, but desires that every man be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth. Do not wait until it is too late. Do not delude yourself that being a good person is enough. Do not put your trust in what passes away. I have returned to tell you this. Today is the day. Now is the time. Heaven awaits you. But hell does too, and the choice, inexorably, is yours. Thank you very much for following this testimony to the end. If you are still here, it is because something has deeply touched your spirit. And it is no coincidence. Every word you have heard may have been written for you. Now we ask you for a simple but powerful gesture. Write in the comments where in the world you are watching us from, so we can pray for your nation and unite with you spiritually. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. Every day, we publish new revelations and messages that can awaken, strengthen, and guide souls in search of truth. And above all, share this video with at least 3 people you care about. A message from heaven, when it arrives at the right time, can change a life, rekindle faith, and bring a lost heart into the arms of God.